The New York Jets have officially cut ties with Aaron Rodgers. The Aaron Rodgers era in New York is officially over, and we're here to talk about it and react to the news with our Jets beat writer, Brian Costello. This is the Gangs All Here live show. We're live on YouTube, Facebook, X, wherever you get your podcasts and watch this show live. Kaz, welcome. I know you're on vacation, but how you feeling about the Aaron Rodgers era officially being over?
Yeah, staycation, Ryan. So I'm home, but I taking some time off after the Super Bowl before the combine. But yeah, Aaron Rodgers news calls for duty here. Look, not surprised. Obviously, I think we've been talking about this since November. Really, I kind of remember November being when it really kicked in. I think I wrote a column sometime in November that they had to move on. I know we discussed that, and I think you and Frankie had asked me a number of times the percentage, and I kept saying 1% just because anything can happen. But I kind of felt all along this was the direction this was going. Then obviously when Jake Glazer reported about the meeting on Sunday, that made it clear that this was done. Jets took a few days here to officially announce it, and it's not officially official yet, though, Ryan, because they haven't cut him yet. Right. Which I think now, if they want to do a post June 1 cut, they can't cut until March 12th. So I think that's when it gets even more official.
Yeah, I the post June 1 cut does make sense because you could spread that cap hit right over 2 years, and that helps reset and give Muji and Glenn a little bit more room to operate with this cap space. Kaz, I know, like you said, we expected this to happen just because of the way this offseason has transpired. But ultimately, when you're looking back now at this Jets era with Aaron Rodgers, how are you evaluating it?
Oh, I mean, it's one of the biggest disappointments in the history of the franchise, which is a mouthful, right? Because this franchise has had some disappointment through the years. None of us were alive to see 1968. And since then, it's been a lot of disappointment, right? It's like, if you look back at the 70s, they went 11 years between the playoffs or 10 years between the playoffs. And then, when I was young in the 80s, there was a lot of disappointment then. And, the 90s had the Kotite era, the Coslett era. Like there's been a lot of disappointing times in this Jets history, but nothing compares to these last 14 years. And this is part of it. When we look back at April of 2023, or even if you don't even want to go back further to March, like when Rodgers went on McAfee and said he wanted to be a Jet, like think about the excitement level that happened then. And then when the actual trade went through and the press conference and the lonely Lombardi and like this, there was a lot of hope and a lot of excitement that he could end this playoff drought. And, it was nothing but disappointment, really. I mean, one of the things I've been going back and forth with people on who've been arguing like that he had a good season this year, right? Is in 10 years, like what's the game? What's the play that you're going to talk about with Aaron Rodgers? We're going to talk about the introduction on September 11th, 2023, right? Like that's the memory from this era. And that what came 20 minutes later is, really the memory of this era. So just a tremendous disappointment, Ryan, I think is how everyone's going to look back at this.
Yeah, I completely agree, Kaz. And it's wild how this played out. And you bring up a great point about the opening ceremony, right? The September 11th, running out with the American flag. That image will forever be burned, I think, in Jets fans' memories, because that last year was the moment where we're like, wow, this is our chance. This is the team that we're fully going behind, and to only get robbed by only having 4 plays that year. I think that's just gonna be the lasting image for the Aaron Rodgers era. And you put it great, put it perfectly. It's a complete failure. And they went for it and it didn't work in any way. I do want to welcome in Frankie Vittorini from U Stadium. This is Gangs All Here live show. Guys, we did get a joint statement from head coach Aaron Glenn and general manager Darren Muji on the Aaron Rodgers news. Last week, we met with Aaron and shared that our intention was to move in a different direction at quarterback. It was important to have this discussion now to provide clarity and enable each of us to the proper time to plan for our respective futures. We want to thank him for leadership, passion, dedication he brought to the organization and wish him success moving forward. And this was from Woody Johnson. I personally want to thank Aaron for his time with the Jets. His arrival in 2023 was met with unbridled excitement, and I will forever be grateful that he chose to join us to continue his Hall of Fame career. From day one, he embodied all that it meant to be a New York Jet, embraced our fans, and immersed himself in our city. That is what I will remember most when I look back at his time here. He will always be welcome, and I wish him only the best in whatever he chooses to do next. Before I get Frankie's reaction, Kaz, I do want to ask you, there still is that element of, was Aaron even going to want to play in 2025? What is your read on him? I know we can't say, hey, listen, I don't know Aaron personally, so I don't know what he's thinking, but do you think he potentially was like, you know what, I might be hanging him up here anyway in 2025?
Doesn't seem like that, Ryan, from the way this is played out, right? Because I thought one of the, like, when I started thinking about how this could play out, I thought one of the possibilities was, they have this conversation, and if Aaron felt the Jets were lukewarm on him or not, or even worse, just not even coming back, like, he would say, okay, I think I'm going to retire. I don't really want to go join another team. And I think if that had been the conversation last week, the Jets and Rodgers' side would have held this news in, and he would have announced it himself. I think the Jets would have let Aaron Rodgers announce he was retiring at some point, however he wanted to do that. The fact that this news came out on Sunday through Glazer, my read was that Aaron or someone in his camp put that out there. I don't think the Jets were the ones putting it out there. You never know, but that's just my read. And so I think he wanted to be known, like, he's available, and I think this is just me reading the tea leaves, right? I don't have any information on this, but I think if he was to retire, Ryan, he would have announced his retirement, and that's how this news would have. We would have never known the Jets said we're not interested, right? Like, he would have walked away, and the Jets would have wanted that too. Because look, the Jets are bending over backwards here to be respectful of him, like with these statements and stuff. So clearly they want this to be a nice, clean breakup. And I think if he wanted to retire, they would have just let him do that.
Frankie Vittorini from U Stadium. How you doing, bud? What's your reaction to the Aaron Rodgers era being over?
Hey, what's up, guys? How we doing? Listen, I think it was time. It was time. Sometimes timelines don't work out. I don't see, why so many fans are up in arms about this. I think this was a foregone conclusion. I guess that we were in this win now window, but when you saw a first-time OC, when you saw a first-time head coach come in here, first-time GM, what Tanner Angstrand specifically, I think, might have been the biggest variable in all this because of what he might want to do offensively. We can all speculate because we don't know, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff that he wants to do with pre-snap motion and a lot of RPO kind of things. And he wants to run a new age style of offense. And I think from what we've seen, Ryan and Kaz all year, it's an outdated style. It's a key in on your wide receiver one or your first read, try to force it there. He doesn't have the legs anymore to kind of improvise and make things happen on a broken down play like he used to. And I just think it was time to move on. And like Kaz was saying, and I think Rossini also mentioned this, the Rodgers really didn't want to necessarily come back. He sort of wanted the Jets to sort of beg for him to come back, and I don't think they were ready to do that. So this is the right way. I want that quarterback room to finally become a place where you can bring a rookie in, you can develop a new system, a new way of playing offense. And I think Rodgers not being there can only help that, in my opinion. Tyrod's there, bring in a veteran free agent quarterback if you find the need to, and then draft a kid. So I think moving forward, we can finally clear this stench and then just say, we can breathe and say that it feels like a weight on our shoulders, doesn't it? All these expectations and Aaron and everything that comes with him, it's gone. You can start fresh, new, young minds, first timers, which could be bad in a way, but yeah. I mean, but you know what I mean? It's nice.
Frankie, you sound like a guy trying to talk himself into this, frankly.
I am. Absolutely. I 100% am. You read me like a book.
You guys could be good. There's no hope. There's no expectations. It's like a weight off my shoulder.
I am trying to
understand.
You get where I'm coming from, right? A little bit.
I understand the segment of the fan base that's upset. I get it. Like, The alternatives aren't like there's no alternative right now on paper that you're like, okay, like that's better week one. Like let's pick an opponent. They're playing the Buffalo Bills week one. Okay. Do you feel better if it's Aaron Rodgers your quarterback or Tyrod Taylor's your quarterback? Aaron Rodgers. Like
Obviously,
yeah. Aaron Rodgers or a rookie. Aaron Rodgers. Like there's no alternative that makes you feel better about right now. You have to kind of step back and say, this is about the big picture. This is about Aaron Glenn establishing himself here and making the Jets a winning program beyond week one, right? Like this isn't about winning week one. This isn't about even 2025. And I get it. It's a tough pill to swallow because you guys have been through so much crap for 14 years and everyone just wants this playoff drought to end. What I would say is, the way we look at things on paper oftentimes doesn't work out the way on the field. So you never know. Like the 49ers didn't know what they had in Brock Purdy, right? I would argue the Eagles didn't really know what they had in Jalen Hurts for a while there, right?
Yeah.
Like the best quarterbacks aren't always the number one and number two picks, as Jets fans well know. So, who knows? We'll see what their plan is as the months unfold here. But I don't think all is lost.
No.
But there's definitely risk involved. But we saw there was risk involved with Rodgers too.
Yeah, Kaz, I think one final thing for you, because I know we got to let you go. But my question here finally is, as you're looking at this decision, is it the right move by Glenn and Muji to cut ties with Aaron Rodgers and say we're going in a different direction and we're going to start this thing from the bottom and building this culture, getting a new quarterback in here to lead our franchise moving forward?
I do think it is, Ryan. I think it's just too tough. It would have been too tough for Aaron Glenn to establish himself here with Aaron Rodgers there. I think it would have been tough for Tanner Engstrand to build his offense with Aaron Rodgers there. And I want to be clear, like, I think some of this gets twisted into saying like Rodgers was a bad guy here or a bad teammate. He wasn't. Like, I was impressed with how Rodgers handled himself. And there are a lot of those guys in that locker room that loved Aaron Rodgers. And I think you see that with some of the social media stuff, with some of their comments last week on Radio Row. Especially the defensive guys, I think really loved them, which kind of, tells you something. Like, I think the offensive guys had complicated feelings about him because I think they liked him and respected him. They didn't always love the way he ran the offense, right? Especially when Devontae got there and everything started going toward him. But that doesn't mean he's a bad teammate. Like he was a good teammate. Like I saw him in the locker room. He was always talking to guys. He was always kind of the Pied Piper. At the end of the year, Jarius Monroe got elevated, right? Or got signed to the active roster, I should say, the rookie safety from Tulane. And like, no one was happier than Rodgers. Like, he called him out in his press conference. And then I was actually at Monroe's locker talking to him a few days later, and Rodgers came over and was like making fun of him because I was interviewing him like he was a big star, and like just like engagements like that. I've covered a lot of guys that have come to the Jets toward the end of their careers, accomplished guys. And most of the time it feels like they're stopping by and passing through and they're not really engaged. They're not really invested in the Jets. It's just kind of like one last paycheck for them. That was never the case with Rodgers. He was into this team. He wanted it to work. It didn't work. But I don't think when we talk about everything that comes with Rodgers, because there's a lot, it wasn't like he was a bad teammate, a bad guy in the locker room.
No.
I just want to make that clear, because I think some people perceive that when we talk about the other stuff off the field,
like the McAfee, the missing the mandatory mini camp days, like those type of things.
Those things are baggage for coaches, right?
Yeah.
They don't really affect the team that much. Like the McAfee stuff, I never thought that affected the locker room. I don't think they cared. And I also, guys, like for whatever it's worth, I heard that was not a discussion at all. There was no discussion about Pat McAfee. There was no discussion.
I was going to ask you, so you think
that was overblown?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it happened. I don't know. I know that was reported, but from what I heard, there was no discussions like that. Like they like Glenn and Muji had made up their mind, and they were telling him we're moving on. It wasn't like, hey, if you do this, and this, you can come back. And like the idea, like they would tell him, yes, I think the report was he had to be at every training camp practice. Like that's mandatory. Like a coach, you don't have to tell them that, right? Like you can find them, and he never missed any training camp. I guess, or I don't know if the reference was to mandatory minicamp because he missed that, and obviously they fined him, right? That was a big deal. You can't tell him he has to be at OTAs. Like that's a violation of the CBA, right? So those are voluntary. No coach can tell a player you have to be at the OTA. So like they can't go there. So yeah, I don't think this was much of a discussion, to be honest. I think Muji and Glenn had kind of figured this out. And from talking to people who interviewed for those jobs that didn't get them, like almost everyone I talked to said like they thought the Jets needed to move on. So I don't know if there was anyone who would have come in and been like embracing Aaron Rodgers. So there's a lot. It's a tough one. There's a lot to unpack with it, and it's not. I get why there's disagreement among the fan base about it, because when you just look at on paper, like I said, he's still the best option early this, going into 2025.
Yeah, best option, but only won 5 games, and that's just again. Yeah. There's a lot to it. There's a lot to unpack.
Which shows you what on paper looks like, right? Because on paper last year, none of us had them winning 5 games. Like I think the most pessimistic person around the Jets probably was like 9-8 or something like that, and they didn't come close to that. So yeah, we like to think we know, we don't know, and we celebrate. Like look at the stuff that was celebrated by the fan base last year, like Tyron Smith signing was like a huge celebration. Mike Williams signing was a huge celebration. The drafting of Malachi Corley was a huge celebration, which I'm not putting that one on the fans. That was the team hyped him up a little too much around the draft. But like you think about stuff that everyone was wrong about in the last year. So you never know. Like it's easy to say,
quick question.
Oh my God, they're dead, Yeah.
Kaz, do you think he plays next year, Aaron Rodgers? Do you think he's on the starting roster?
Great question. I can't. I do think he does, Frankie. I can't figure out where yet.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you there.
I do think someone is going to take a chance on him. And like I think where he would really do well is with like a really established head coach, offensive head coach. If like he ended up with the Rams, I know that's being thrown around that like they could move on from Stafford. Like Sean McVay and him, like I think he'd have enough respect for Sean McVay that he would kind of, listen to him and do what's asked in terms of offensively. Kyle Shanahan, if like for some reason he ended up in San Francisco, I could see a situation too where nothing happens quickly and then there's an injury in August. He waits for that, and then whoever loses a quarterback in August signs him, something like that.
I'm looking forward to seeing him announce his new team on McAfee show.
He does like he's keeps himself in good shape. Like he'll be ready to go. If that happens. So.
Guys, I know I gotta let you go, man. I know I gotta let you go. But I got one last question for you.
Sure.
With this move, what's next for guys like Lazard and Devontae Adams, guys that came in with Aaron Rodgers here? Do you expect them to be on this Jets roster next season?
No, I don't. And I mean, it's basically about the salary cap, Ryan, more than anything, right? Like Devontae's contract, he was always going to have to do something in 2025, whether he was on the Raiders or the Jets or some other team. Like it's a crazy amount of, I think it was at 38 million. I think it is the number. So, and the Jets will be on the hook for cap wise, I think 8 or 9 after they cut him. So they'll save a lot of money there cap wise. I don't think he'd want to be a part of the Jets without Aaron Rodgers. So I think he'll move on. And then Lazard it's just too much money for not enough production. I thought, Lazard had some good moments early last year before he got hurt, but I would think they're moving on from him too, because they can get some cap savings with him as well.
Well, guys, we appreciate you coming on, giving us your reaction and your analysis on this move. We know that, a lot's going to happen over the next couple of months as the Jets are going to now try to figure out what they're going to do at the quarterback position without Aaron Rodgers. But we appreciate you, man, giving us some time and your perspective here.
I'm going to sleep until the combine, guys. Wake me up when
Are you going to Indy, Kaz?
I am.
Nice. I will buy you a beer or Elmo's burger. They have the good sirloin burger, I think.
Just a burger? I can't get a steak out of you, Frankie? Like,
a sirloin burger is kind of a steak. It's a sirloin. I mean, we'll get there. I got you. Okay. Steak done.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
See you guys.
Guys, you're the best. Thanks, man.
All right, Frankie. So we heard what Kaz had to say there. Pretty interesting stuff there about
Definitely.
the McAfee stuff. He's the first one I'm hearing now that report was a little bit of BS there with the Muji and Glenn factor. And I like that he's saying it because I think Glenn and Muji are going to try to establish, like, tell me if I'm crazy. They're going to try to establish their own media relations and like what their narrative is. And they're not going to allow these leaks to tell the story. You know what I mean? And it furthers
makes you
the
think, where are
narrative.
the leaks coming from, Rye? Like, who are these leaks? I mean, I was speculating, and I made a joke about this on Twitter, but I was speculating it's Rodgers, and I don't think it's Rodgers, but I was kind of kidding. But the more,
you just heard Kaz. You heard Kaz say like he thinks it was coming from Rodgers' camp about Sunday with Jay Glazer.
Yes, yeah. I mean, and that narrative, or what people are running with, that the Jets told Rodgers he couldn't do McAfee, doesn't that make Rodgers in some way look better? Doesn't that give him more of a favorable opinion online, especially, in the court of public opinion? It makes it seem like the Jets weren't allowing him to do what he wants to do. So I do think it was from Rodgers' camp, or a front office exec that likes Rodgers. Could be. But yeah, I like Rye. I like what Muji and Glenn are doing. They're telling this entire team, they're telling the media, this is our team. And it's not about any one player. It's not about our past. It's not about anything. It's about what we think is best for this team and to build this new culture. And Aaron doesn't fall in line with that. And you really have to respect what they're doing. Whether you agree with it or not, it makes sense. And I respect what they're doing. And I also agree with it.
Listen, I hate to say I told you so, Frankie, but I told you so. Like I said this, I said this from weeks and weeks and weeks ago before the season was even over, and I got killed for it during our shows and the post-game shows. I said, I don't see it anymore. Like the Jets are hiring a new head coach. They're going to hire a new GM. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to jive with any of the new people they hire. And I think that's a big part of this whole hiring process when they went into it with the 33rd team. They had to ask every one of these candidates, what are your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers? How are you going to handle this situation? What do you want to do with that? Because I do believe that Woody and Aaron probably didn't like each other that much. And I don't think that was going to work either way. And I think Woody was done with the Aaron Rodgers era early this year. But it just didn't make sense if you're taking over this team and trying to be, especially a first-time head coach, trying to make it work with Aaron. He is an enigma in every single sense of that word. Everything he says, everything he does on and off the field is going to be highly criticized, highly talked about, like we're doing right now. And the words he uses, the actions he chooses, what he says to the media, what he says to McAfee, those things are going to be analyzed. And it doesn't do well if you're trying to be a first-time head coach and have the respect of the locker room and having the quarterback be a bigger figure than you on this team. It just didn't make sense.
Ryan, and at what point with Tanner Engstrand, a first-time offensive coordinator, at what point during a season, let's say if they were to bring him back in 25, at what point would Aaron take over the play calling? At what point? If you go on a 2-3 game losing streak, what do you think Aaron, who's basically the same age as Tanner Engstrand, you think he's going to listen to this guy?
No way.
No, of course he's not. He's going to go and call exactly what he wants to, like he did this year with Todd Downing, by the way, which we don't need to get into. But let's be honest
true,
about it.
It
is. I mean, come on. The guy, it's his way or the highway, literally.
Absolutely. Dude, you're talking about a 42-year-old quarterback that was second in the league in the most amount of pass attempts this year.
Insane.
That's absurd. It's absurd. And I know you're trying to make this offense work your way, but your way, like you so eloquently said it earlier, it's old and antiquated. It doesn't work anymore in today's NFL. It's not, they don't use motion. They don't do pre-snap reads. It is a single read on your number one wide receiver, like you said. And the other thing that I think alienates some of the guys on the offensive side of the ball that Kaz had talked about earlier, while the defensive players might have loved Aaron because Aaron can help them learn about how a quarterback dissects them defensively and what a quarterback is reading on them, they may appreciate that because he's a veteran, he's a true leader, and he can do that. The offensive side of the ball, your young players like Garrett Wilson, like Breece Hall, like Malachi Corley, These guys are getting alienated from Aaron because they don't run at the same speed that he does. They're probably not as smart football-wise as he is IQ. And you could see Aaron was kind of taking them out of the offense. It was Aaron Rodgers' offense. I'm in shotgun. I'm taking the snap, and I'm going to Devontae Adams, Tyler Conklin.
Who they brought in. They had to bring in Devontae midway through or
if
whatever.
Lazard wasn't hurt if Lazard wasn't hurt the second half of the year, I can imagine Alan Lazard would have been way more involved in the offense. You know what I mean? Like,
you're right.
Garrett Wilson was at his wit's end. I just keep going back to that play versus the Seattle Seahawks in the red zone. This guy was wide open. He ran the perfect route from Garrett Wilson, and Aaron just airmails the ball out of bounds. I don't know, man. You got to believe in your young players and the young talent that you have in Garrett and Brees and Braylon Allen. The fact that the Jets were second lowest in rush yards per game, the worst in red zone when it came to running the ball, in all efficient stats that you can think of, whether it's percentage of plays being choosing the run, the actual efficiency in which they ran the ball in the red zone, it was bad. It was the worst in football. So if you're looking at all of those stats and what this offense was able to produce, it was a pass-heavy offense that didn't run the ball, that alienated its true number one wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, its number one running back in Breece Hall, and they didn't use them effectively. And if I'm a head coach coming in here and saying, I've seen the talent, I've seen these guys produce, and I don't think they've reached their full potential. And by most NFL evaluators, they believe in the talent of Garrett Wilson. They believe in the talent of Breece Hall. We got to use those guys, and we need to bring in a new quarterback that can actually let those guys use their talents to the best advantage. And I don't think Aaron Rodgers was ever going to do that here.
No, he really wasn't. And let's talk about our wins. 4 of our 5 wins were against backup quarterbacks.
Go ahead. Tell him, Frankie. Tell him about him. Tell him about
backup quarterbacks on bad bottom-of-the-barrel teams for the most part, besides the Dolphins. He beat Will Levis. Okay.
Worst team in football, the Titans, number 1 pick.
The Titans. Jacoby Brissett of the Patriots. Mac Jones of the Jaguars. And Tyler Huntley of the Dolphins. So for all these fans saying, oh, we could have won this game, the kicking game cost us this game, the defense blew it in that game. All right, I'll give you 3 wins, maybe, but I'm also going to take away 3 wins against backup quarterbacks on bottom 5 teams. He had really, Aaron, 1 impressive win all year last year. 1 against the Texans. 1. Mind you, in that Texans game, let's rewind a bit. Yeah, in that Texans game, do you know, somebody told me this and I went back and looked, when Garrett caught that ridiculous one-hander, do you know when he went back to the bench, who he embraced? Wasn't Aaron Rodgers. It was Tyrod Taylor. And do you remember later on in the year how Tyrod Taylor, when he came in, who he actually forced a ball to score a touchdown? Garrett Wilson. There's something there with Aaron and Garrett that I'm telling you had something to do with this as well. The same way they didn't allow the wide receivers coach to take any interviews. They blocked all those requests. Garrett Wilson probably doesn't want Aaron around. And honestly, Ryder, what you were saying about all these defensive guys that have been clamoring for Aaron to come back, I don't think they realize that what's actually going on the offensive end. I really don't. Not. I think from their perspective, they're like, yeah, look at how great of a quarterback he is based on what they've seen. But I think when you dive in, I don't really see Brees and Garrett and some of these young guys coming out there and being all, down about it or down emojing like Quinn and Williams. I don't see them doing that stuff. I think they know a little bit more than what the defensive players do.
Yeah, I agree with you, Frankie. It's the fans that are just the only sole reason, and I agree to an extent, is there's no better options right now for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is the best option. Yes, you put those names on the paper with the Kirk Cousins, Justin Fields, anyone in this quarterback class in the draft. Aaron Rodgers is better than all those quarterbacks. I have no doubts about that. He is best talent-wise, still can throw with the best of them. Yes, but the problems that we just outlined when it comes to offensive scheme, a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator, alienating your number 1 wide receiver, not running the ball well at all as a football team, which means you don't control the clock well. They were 3-7 in 1-score games, which means Aaron did not do well end of game situations. And he is such an enigma. I'm going to highlight that again. He is such a persona off the field. Yes, he is a Hall of Famer. Yes, he is a 4-time MVP. Yes, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. But if you are a first-time head coach, you are going to lose that PR battle when it comes to who's going to get the bigger headlines. It's always going to be Aaron Rodgers every time he opens his mouth. It's not a diss on Aaron Rodgers. I have respect for him. I respect him as a player. What he's done in his career is incredible. It's considering he dropped in the first round. He didn't get drafted high where he should have been. He had to sit behind Brett Favre and eat crow and earn his way on to be the starter for the Packers and had an incredible career with them. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the greatest I've ever seen. But it was never going to work here, Frankie. Once that injury happened with the Achilles, we saw it all come apart this year. They went all in. They got Tyron Smith, Mike Williams, traded for Hassan Reddick. They brought in Devontae Adams. None of these moves worked. It was done. They needed to rip the Band-Aid off. I said that for months now, and I'm happy that we're finally in a place now, Frankie, where this Jets franchise can take the next step and move forward.
Yeah, and he didn't develop anybody that we would have liked for him to develop. Garrett Wilson didn't have a better year. Brees had a down year. Rucker didn't score a touchdown. Conklin, in all regards, had a down year too for his standard of what we expected him to do. Who else had a good year? Braylon Allen disappeared. Malachi Corley
was never
was a disappearing act all year. I mean, like, did Aaron help out really anybody offensively? Once Devontae Adams came in, then bam, you saw, glimpses of what they used to do in Green Bay. But that's not where this team is going. This team, and I'm going to state this many times, Rye, they need to develop an actual quarterback room.
Amen.
Around Tanner Engstrand, around this new philosophy about regarding pre-motions and RPOs and being creative and being off balance. That's what this team needs to do. They need a quarterback room like Minnesota built there, right? Minnesota has Josh McCown there. Their head coach is a quarterback guy. They have people there that value the quarterback play. So then when Sam Darnold had to start last year, they can just plug and play. And Sam Darnold played like an MVP at points. The Jets need to build a quarterback room. Rodgers wasn't going to be interested in doing any of that. They have a real possibility, the Jets, if we can draft a quarterback. We'll get into it down the line, I'm sure. But there's some names I really like in this draft. For us to build a quarterback room where you can have a rookie quarterback in there that learns and have them compete. That's another thing. Aaron Rodgers wasn't good enough last year, and he's not Tom Brady, where you feel like just giving him the keys again is automatically going to put us in playoff contention. We got to stop believing that because it wasn't true. It just wasn't. Could it be true? Yes. What's the probability? What's the in actuality? Could that actually be a thing? I don't think so. This wasn't a playoff team with Aaron Rodgers coming back. I'm just sorry.
Frankie, that's what people don't understand. That's what Jets fans don't understand. And I'm tired of seeing the comments, and I'm tired of seeing the narrative from Jets fans. Aaron's your best chance of winning next year. You need to realize this Jets team is not a playoff team. I'm gonna be honest with you. The defense took a massive step back. The talent is not there that we thought it was. And I'm tired of seeing young players that have potential. We don't get to see their full potential in a Breece Hall or a Garrett Wilson because they're not being used properly. Because it's either a bad offensive coordinator or it's piss poor quarterback play. And that's constantly what we've seen as Jets fans.
Yeah.
And we ripped the Band-Aid off with Zach Wilson, and now we're doing the same thing with Aaron Rodgers. It didn't work out here. You got to flush it and go on to the next thing.
People say, too, we're going to alienate this young talent. What happened this last year? Did you not alienate Garrett Wilson? Are you not alienating, in a way, maybe Breece Hall, who hasn't said a word about anything going on now? Sorry to cut you off, but,
no.
We're alienating these young pieces. Like you're saying, Braylon Allen disappeared. Malachi Corley, who Aaron offered his home to in the offseason, he couldn't get him involved at all. But you had to trade picks for Devontae Adams to come here and force feed him the ball to get these records. I'm agreeing with you more than ever on this. You were early on this. I'll give you your flowers, dude. And you look good, by the way. I like your little tan over there. I know you had a little nice time down south. Tampa's a good place. But no. But seriously, you were. I'll say this: you were earlier than most, if not everyone that I was talking to, or what I was seeing on Twitter, what I was looking at online. Right, you were right. You said it from Jump Street. He doesn't have it, and he doesn't have it. He's not going to
stay healthy. That's another thing I want to highlight for Jets fans. he battled injuries all year, and he probably shouldn't have played a couple of games, to be frank, because of how banged up he was. And then the first year he tore his Achilles. What makes you think a 42-year-old quarterback who's going to be 43 in December, who's coming 2 years now off removed from a torn Achilles, has battled injuries since his whole entire Jets tenure, had the broken thumb with the Packers his final year? What makes you think that he's going to automatically play all 17 games again and be healthy for the Jets all season? Because we saw those injuries did hamper the Jets offense too. He refused to throw the ball downfield. Remember, Frankie, he couldn't get out of the pocket, escape that he normally does, and Aaron buys time for his receivers downfield to get open. He wasn't able to do that anymore. Another year older, he's going to be less mobile. It wasn't going to work unless you had an incredible Eagles offensive line in front of you with Saquon Barkley running the ball. This was never going to work here. And I'm happy that Muji and Glenn, like we talked about when they first were hired, I felt a different thing with Aaron Glenn, that it feels like this guy is putting his stamp on this team. It's his show. He's running it, and he's going to establish a culture here. And the final thing I want to talk about here, Frankie, is the Quinnen Williams thing, because I think there's a couple other players that you talked about and you may have mentioned with defensive side of the ball and how they're embracing this move. Quinnen tweeted out, looks like it's another rebuild year for me. If I am Aaron Glenn, I'm texting Quinnen and saying, listen, guy, you're super talented. You're one of the best defensive players in the league, in my opinion. We think you can reach even better heights in this defensive scheme. But here is your one warning, Quinnen. It's my way or the highway. You better get on board, or we're gonna ship your ass out. Because that's the truth. That is the truth. I think Aaron Glenn, while he is a player's coach, he's going to be hard on these guys. He's going to demand respect. He's going to demand culture. He's going to demand winning, effort, plays every single time. Every game you're going to play your ass off. And if you're not on board with his vision, then they're going to get rid of you. And they're going to get the best assets they can back for you. That's my thing and my read on this situation, Frankie. And I won't be shocked if the Jets make some major shakeups on this roster besides just now with designating Aaron Rodgers as a post-June 1 cut. There's going to be more changes coming to this roster.
100%. Ryan, they need to turn a few boys in there into men. At One Jets Drive, there's a lot of immaturity going on around there. There is. Robert Saleh did a bad job, in my opinion, instilling any discipline in there. I call him the substitute teacher. And sometimes that can work for certain players. We, unfortunately, have some players that I think were feeling themselves a little bit too much early in their careers, had the accolades and thought they could kind of do what they want. Coming into camp out of shape, which not many people want to talk about, but it was true, especially with Quinnen. Shut up, man. Shut up. You, Quinnen, were cheering or were celebrating for Aaron Glenn when he got hired. You were all about it. Then his first move, which I think was a good move, and I'm sure you do too, and some fans do, you're going to disrespect him not once, but twice, and then get in your feelings and delete your Twitter. This is the representation of the Jets. This is the young nucleus of talent. This is the core that's going to take us to championships. It's ridiculous. Jalen Hurts isn't on Twitter tweeting at random people and deactivating his Twitter. Could you imagine Jalen Hurts doing that? That should be their standard. If you want to build a winning team, you need a lot of people that are somewhat, I don't think anyone could be like Jalen Hurts because I just think he's as good of a leader as you'll get. Maybe there is a few, but that's the standard. Sauce is deleting his Twitter, coming back on, going on Snapchat. It's a common theme here, right?
I know. Listen, I agree with you, man. There's going to be a lot this comes this offseason. Now, officially, the Jets are going to be looking for a new quarterback. Couple notes here on the Rodgers getting released by the Jets. Ian Rappaport says, clarity on what's next for Aaron Rodgers. Per NFL rules, if a club announces that they are terminating a vested veteran, other clubs are able to talk to him. No tryout or signing is permitted. Rodgers won't be officially released until the league year, which is March 13th, but talks can happen now. So Aaron could start the recruitment process with other teams in the NFL and put feelers out and see, hey, would you be interested in my services and me coming back for probably one final year? I don't think Aaron has much football left in him.
Honestly, Ryan, I don't even think he has a year left in him. I don't think he's going to be able to go through a year. And Ryan, I think the last 2 years took so much out of him. And honestly, if there's something I want to give him credit for, he has been a warrior in terms of his training regimen, in terms of him showing up and playing on Sundays. I mean, Rye, to go through what he went through with that Achilles at that age, I mean, it's tough to come back. So I will give him a lot of credit for that. That's a difficult situation. I think he's tired, and I don't think he's going to want to just jump back, right back into things. So when the Jets were even telling him, hey, we need an answer before the combine, maybe even before the Super Bowl, I think that was sort of telling Aaron, knowing that he's going to need some time off. You know how these old vets are. They want to show up at the last possible minute because they're just sick of this routine. I think he's tired, man. I could see him going somewhere for a year. Pittsburgh, I've been telling you. We've been talking about Pittsburgh
I just
for
don't see
a few
Mike
months.
Tomlin driving with him, man.
I know they like each other. So I know that's a thing, and they keep in contact in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that looks like, if that's like a text every 2 months or whatever.
Don't you agree with Mike Tomlin, though? What he's been so great at doing as a coach in the NFL is that he's able to keep these highly controversial characters under wraps. Like Antonio Brown, we didn't know he was that crazy until he got left the Steelers. Le'Veon Bell, not until he left the Steelers. Looks like we're getting the same thing with George Pickens now.
Interesting.
He knows
I like
how to keep these guys under wraps, and I just don't think it's going to work with Aaron if he's there in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I was going to ask you this too. How big of a distraction do you think Aaron Rodgers is? I mean,
a massive distraction.
He is, isn't he? Yeah, I've been kind of downplaying it.
The
last couple of weeks, saying, "Oh, I'm talking strictly on the field. I don't want to bring up off the field."
Frankie, what was his quote?
What
was his quote at the end of the 2023 year when he missed the entire year with Achilles? Anything that has nothing to do with football, that needs to leave the building. Everything that has to do with football winning, and what was everything that happened in off the field with Aaron this year? He still did it. Still won a McAfee. He had a documentary come out. He missed mandatory minicamp. That's football. That's winning. That's establishing a culture. I am not critiquing you as a Hall of Fame player. What I am critiquing you is your on the field play. You didn't attack downfield. You didn't take shots downfield. You were 25th in QBR. In the big moments, you were 3-7. You battled through injuries. I give you credit that. You alienated your number one most talented wide receiver in Garrett Wilson, even though you'll argue, oh, he was top 5 in targets this year. What are you talking about? Look back at the tape and look what you really missed on the bigger plays. I can not get that Seahawks play burned out of my mind. And not to mention that play versus the Dolphins where he almost threw him out of bounds, which should have been an easy walk-in touchdown. There is play after play after play from Aaron Rodgers that you can highlight this past year where that was not vintage Aaron Rodgers. That's the standard I'm holding you to, buddy, as a quarterback. I'm not like you are a distraction off the field because of what you say, and the media just wants to continuously cover it like the New York Post does and everyone else, because that is what gets clicks. You do, Aaron, and you know that because of your play on field. But I am holding you to a high standard because the quarterback that we were promised at the start of this whole Aaron Rodgers going all-in era was this is a chance for us to go to the playoffs and make a Super Bowl run. It never happened. It was tragic what happened to you September 11th on that field against the Buffalo Bills because that really ruined a massive opportunity, what it felt like. And then this past season just never developed the way we had hoped. And there's a number of factors in it. I think Aaron's play was one of them. I think the offensive scheme was one of them. I think Tyron Smith was obviously not the same player. Mike Williams didn't turn out to be the receiver you had hoped for. There is a multitude of things. The defense took a massive step back. Rob Saleh gets fired, a couple games in. But at the end of the day, it didn't work out here. And it's going to be looked back as a massive failure. And it's going to be on Aaron Rodgers' career now that the 2 years in New York Jets went down as a massive, epic failure.
Right. He threw the ball 584 times, like you were saying, second most in the NFL. 3,897 yards is not enough in a 17-game season with Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams and Breece Hall that can catch and get a ton of yak out of the backfield. That's not enough. 28 touchdowns for those many attempts for 17 games is not enough. The numbers were not good last year. Let's stop saying it. I am somewhere in the middle between the Aaron Rodgers truthers and the people saying he was terrible. I think it's in the middle. He was average last year. He's an average NFL quarterback in 2024-25 football. The way schemes are, as outdated as his offense is, factor in everything, he is an average quarterback that's only getting older. You don't need to go out of your way to convince an average 41, eventually soon to be 42-year-old quarterback to return that has all these off-field things going on that takes away from what you're trying to build. And the Jets aren't trying to build a team that is about players. And I like that a lot about Aaron Glenn. Shout outs to him. They want to build a team that is about the team and not about an individual player. And Parcells was like that. He's the first one, Glenn, first coach we've had that's really, I hope he is like this, but based on what I'm seeing, I think he's the only one that's really been like that since Parcells. Rex and Mangini a little bit, but they had those rosters that they were on for the ride for. Herm wasn't like that. Bowles wasn't like that. Gase definitely wasn't like that. I think he's the first one, and I think they need that. The issue is how fast can they turn it around? Because you don't have forever anymore in the NFL, right? You don't have, coaches don't have 7-10 years like they once did. You got 3-4 years to make things work, you and Muji. So I'm interested to see how fast things turn around, but they had to make this move. I wouldn't feel comfortable right now. And I can't believe I'm saying this now, but I've had a little bit of time to kind of digest it. I wouldn't feel comfortable going into next season with Aaron Rodgers. Again, I'm over it. It's over.
It is over. It is officially, well, not officially, but from all intents and purposes, it is over. Aaron Rodgers will be a free agent. His era.
We're saying this.
Yeah, I know. 2 seasons, 18 starts, six wins if you want to count the one versus Buffalo, even though he was cut short. That's the Aaron Rodgers era. And
I like you gave him an extra win. Good for you, Ryan. I'm proud of you. You gave him that 6th win.
Well,
Great
like a
guy
lot of these fans like come at me and say I don't know what I'm talking about. But meanwhile, I was the one that said Aaron Rodgers wasn't going to be a Jet after this year.
It's the exact opposite. But
and then don't be surprised when Kirk Cousins is the quarterback next year, like I told Jake on his show as well. But what do I know? Frankie,
you get killed for that. That's probably going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So when they keep coming at me, I'll just keep spitting facts. Frankie, you're the man. I appreciate you coming on.
As are you, my man. Appreciate you. Thanks, man.
I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about here in the coming weeks, especially with the combine now. The Jets will probably be paying attention to these quarterbacks in this upcoming draft. And we'll see what happens with free agency as well. We'll do some specials. We'll make some opinions and hot takes about what quarterbacks the Jets should go after. We'll see what kind of moves and shakeups they can have on this roster still, Frankie, to come. As Muji and Glenn era are taking over and the Aaron Rodgers era is over. Frankie, as always, go Jets. This is the Gangs All Here live show. Appreciate you.